Hello again, everyone. It's First Fridays with Ambassador Terry and friends. And I have another new friend I was recently introduced to by a friend and colleague and her business partner, Marina Cvetkovic. Marina, glad to have you on.
Thanks for having me, Terry. It's a pleasure.
I'll tell you, your partner and I have done a lot of different lives and different things around your company. And when she suggested you, I jumped on it because you guys are doing some great things for senior executives, chief executives. And I think right now is really an appropriate time here, September 1st, to really talk about that and what you guys are doing, and then I'll interject what I'm doing. So, what are some of the key issues your clients are having, your chief executives and you and your company are working with?
It's a it's a big topic, but I would say one of the things that we see emerging, and we are very happy to see it emerging, is more and more executives really being committed to creating an impact that goes way beyond the profit kind of bottom line, and that goes beyond the walls of a single organization that they're leading. And at the same time, that is a challenge, because at the end of the day, they are still being assessed, based on the profits, based on the turnover, based on the growth, by their shareholders at least. And they need to manage this more complex kind of shareholder stakeholder landscape beyond that. And so while the desire to and the buying in, I would say, into this bigger movement of, we're really here for more than just, making profitable companies is there, a lot of them struggle to balance that, that type of impact with the need for short-term results and keeping the investors and shareholders happy. And so we're there to kind of help them find the way, in a very kind of complex also market environment. And that is a big topic, how to become a more impactful leader in the whole ecosystem, right? And not just a brilliant CEO for the organization.
Outstanding, outstanding. Yeah, and we've discussed it before that this is a big deal right now. We're in going into Q4, the final quarter of the year for those who are calendar taxation appropriate, and and the financial tool for a lot of chief executives, certainly here in the U.S., and you probably see it as well elsewhere, is the earnings before interest and taxation, the EBIT line. Those are the real earnings, how you did. And after that, amortization and other things are finesse. They get moved around to do the best deal for the company and still be an ethical company. And that said, I know some of my clients, I have a couple of clients that are chief executives, and that very thing is what we spend a lot of time talking about is, how can I change the vision of the company in such a way that everybody's in a buy-in, everybody's achieving, it's a positive environment, starting with me as the chief executive. And sometimes that's hard. Well, yeah, it is. Marriage is hard, but you work through it. There's a long-term commitment there, and it's really in your psyche to get to that point when you're on the top of the mountain to make sure the mountain stays stable. Okay. And so I think that's a great subject to think about now. What are some of the key issues going into the fourth quarter that you see with some of your executives?
I mean, I think it goes kind of down the same line, Terry, of also what you were just talking about, right? As you say, as the year kind of approaches the end, the pressure increases. and really kind of helping them keep that midterm and long-term perspective in addition to that short-term pressure is often a challenge, and is something that we are often there to help with, because it is real, right? I mean, they need to meet those short-term targets, whatever the level of the profit that might be for them. And at the same time, they're there for so much more than that, right? And a lot of them are committed to the society, to different kind of stakeholders in the broader kind of ecosystem, to further metrics beyond that, that take long time to accomplish. I mean, particularly when we talk about ESG, and those are things we don't accomplish overnight, and yet we need to start, and we need to keep a focus, on those things, in addition to making sure also, as you say, the mountain stays stable, right? And that's it's a difficult dance to dance. I mean, no doubt about it. Not everyone can be a chief executive, and we're seeing that now more than ever, right? That it does take a really particular type of mental strength and mental agility to be able to, juggle all those balls successfully.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you hit on something that's really should come out to bear, and that is, most companies, certainly companies we work with, you and I and our companies, they're geopolitical. It's more than manufacturing in Erie, Pennsylvania. It's about manufacturing across the world, trading and import export. And when you get the P word in there, political, there's a lot of evil here in the United States right now. And there are a lot of places around the world where the politics are so hot that it's very difficult to plan and project what your business is doing, because you don't know what the government's doing to support you. Mm-hmm. And that's huge. I know one mentee in particular, he is he and she, they're partners. They're very worried about, where their political status is going to be here in the near future, because they're doing business with countries that the United States is fighting with right now, and that's not the best situation to be in. Now, granted, in other countries in different places in the world, that's the status quo, because the countries are very hot. And so I think, looking at from a perspective of day to day, what's the right thing to do, what's the ethical thing to do, is ultimately going to serve you, your stakeholders, and your shareholders. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the political landscape is a huge factor and a huge source of uncertainty. Whether we're fully aware of it in the moment or not, right? And when things like this happen, we just become more aware of it. But the reality is, it is always a factor that is there, and that can massively destabilize a lot of the businesses. And at the same time, I think it just highlights the importance of leaders who are able to navigate that type of, ambiguity, uncertainty, and also potentially rapidly changing environments, right? Leaders who are able to course correct or change the course completely as needed, due to the changing external circumstances. And I think, that becomes key. That becomes also like kind of spotlighted, if you like. And then we see leaders who are able to do that quite skillfully. And then we see those who struggle, right? Who still kind of hold on to their scenario A, even though it's pretty obvious that scenario A is not going to work. And probably hold on to it for a bit too long. And then there's consequences to that, right? So I think that foresight, right, coupled with agility and continuing to look ahead, understanding that we cannot predict everything, but certainly as leaders we can run certain scenarios and test our businesses and see what our biggest risks are, and then do some planning around that, so should the circumstances change, we're not caught completely, unprepared. So I would say foresight with that agility, and it takes also, quite honestly, Terry, like at the bottom, like at the core of it for a lot of leaders is like being able to put aside their ego, because it might be that they need to go with a course that was not at all their preferred course, that was not at all what they've been advocating for maybe many years, to the public internally, and be able to let go of that, right? Because that's simply not the best course anymore for the organization, and be able to put their ego aside, as a result of that, and really pursue objectively whatever the right course is. And that is also something we encounter sometimes, that ego resistance, right? Or the way that we feel personally perhaps defeated, when our preferred scenario doesn't quite come to fruition as we hoped.
Absolutely, absolutely. You hit a couple more points there that I think are valid. Also, a lot of leaders, a lot of my clients over the years, especially, have reflected. Well, I'm the boss now. I can't show fear. I can't, sit down with my senior people and ask for help on a personal level. That's just not heard of. And I said, well, it is heard of. It's just kept quiet. Okay. The best leaders sit down with their core team and say, okay, here's our real problems. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? Have any ideas? Let's talk about it as a team, because we're responsible for this ship. And every time we change course, we want to change course for a good reason, a big storm coming up or something like that, rather than just zigzagging back and forth. So your people don't know where you're going or what you're doing, much less your customers, And again, the geopolitical thing comes up. There's a lot of things. Almost every country and every company, corporation, whether they're international or not, most every decision they make now has something to do with climate change, the SDGs, the Standard Development Goals, ESG. There's a bigger picture to think about than this quarter's final results. And so being present with that, I often am quoted, presence is the point where manifestation becomes action. So you take the grief of the past and turn it into a learning situation. You take the ego and all the fear of the future away, that'll get to it when it gets to it. All you are is right here. And when you're right here, all the distractions are away, and what you're thinking about really comes to fruition, because Mr. and Mrs. Executive, you've earned the right to think that way, okay? And it's about your people. Sir Richard Branson so eloquently puts it, take care of your people, they'll take care of your customers. Very true, very true. It's a mindset shift. One of my latest books, Consortium Business Model for the 21st Century, alludes to that. Okay, it's about achievement. It's not about sales goals. It's not about timelines, because people cheat on that. They get unethical behavior. There's a lot of craziness. But when you switch that to group achievement, they don't pay attention to sales goals and timelines anymore, because they're having fun. They can't wait to get to work, and they're overproducing as a group without burnout.
Yeah.
Did I say without burnout? I certainly did. Your thoughts, Marina?
I love what you said, Terry, about the bringing the core team on board and kind of putting aside that idea that as an executive you have to be the strong one, you have to always have the answers. And it's just, I will say this, I just think that is such an outdated concept of leadership. It just does not work anymore, because the circumstances, the environment changes so rapidly that no single individual can possibly have all the answers, let alone all the best answers, right, to the challenges that we are facing. And so I think it's actually arrogant not to engage your own team. I think it's a duty of the leader to do so. And yet, of course, some of them struggle because of this idea of like, I'm the leader, I have to show them the way. I have to be the one with the answer. And actually, the reality is quite the opposite. And I'm sure, Terry, you see this too. When they show that level of humbleness and openness for true co-creation, the team is then much more likely to step up, to then all truly own whatever the course they decide to go as a team and as an organization, and to become a much better vocal ambassador of that throughout the organization. Because then all of a sudden it's not just something that's been delegated to them, but it's something that they've come up with. And I think in times of uncertainty and ambiguity, that becomes really, really critical, because those members of the core executive team that operate under that sort of culture are much more likely to communicate effectively with their respective teams and much less likely to cut off communication, which we know is the biggest source of anxiety and stress, in people, right? That are kind of, operating in the field and that are more kind of in the operation side of the business. And so I think it's so key, the right way to engage the core team and to be okay with, I don't have all the answers, and let's figure this out together.
Absolutely. You hit on a key point there, and it's a great time to bring it up. And that is, you and your partner do something very unique in your consulting. You take the bosses and you take them out to a neutral place, Brazil, wherever, and get them connected to that true genius self that got them to the position where they're at, and reconnect them to what's their priorities and stuff. Perhaps you can expand on that. Ladies and gentlemen, take notes here. This is a great idea and a great concept.
Yes. I mean, there is, like, I think it's been, even scientifically proven, right? There's just magic that happens in our brains once we are sort of disconnected and plugged out of our known environment, right? And plugged into a more neutral place, as you say. And it allows us to get out of the program, or to recognize what the program is, right? What is kind of our autopilot default way of operating? What is our conditioning? And how that might or might not be serving us. And when you do that work, and when we do any type of really leadership work, Terry, it doesn't work unless we also apply to the person. At the end of the day, any single executive is also human, and how they show up at work in a professional environment is connected to how they show up at home or how they show up with their friends. And so, the work that we do at the end of the day is a very intimate, personal work, because there is no way to truly transform the way that the leader shows up in a workplace unless you transform them from the inside out, right? And that typically touches also their personal life as well. It goes into their core values, their kind of core ways of operating towards life in general, and then how that applies to their kind of professional environment and how that might or might not be serving them. So, but I think in any circumstances, it is an effective way to do this type of work. And I would add that for chief executives, it's a bigger challenge, because, of course, to plug them out of the current environment, it's much more challenging, right? Because their time is just so precious and so scarce. And yet, at the same time, the return on that investment is massive, right? For years and years to come, but also for the whole organization. And that's why we're always interested in starting this type of work at the top, because when you really do it effectively, the benefits are felt across the whole organization and beyond the organization, right? all the way into the ecosystem and all kind of the constituents that we talked about before.
Yeah. Amazing subject. Something that we can move forward on for quite a while. And I'm just amazed by you guys and what you're doing out there, ladies and gentlemen. We'll have a link to the company and stuff like that, and certainly reach out to Marina and start a discussion. The chief executives said they're doing some great stuff out there. Yeah, it's a plug, but that's my job. And thank you, Marina, for coming. This was just a fabulous First Friday.
Thank you, Terry, for having me. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks again.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.